Welcome to the Integrate This EdTech podcast. I'm Jeremy Mikla, joined by co-host David Berner. And our special guest here today, we're really excited to welcome Dr. Jennifer Pieratt. And we're really happy to have you on the show. Jenny is, obviously, if you've followed any of her work, she is a PBL expert. And I know we're going to dive into that, but she's also an author, curriculum designer, and founder of her own company, Crafted Curriculum. Jenny, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Jenny, one thing that we like to do with our guests is kind of have them give a little bit of their backstory. Tell us, how did you get to the point where you're at today?
Yeah, so I started out doing what I swore I would never do, which was becoming a teacher like my mom, and just kind of naturally taught in a way that felt different than the other classes where I was teaching. And one day a student came up to me and said, "Hey, I just visited this place, High Tech High, and they do project-based learning. Do you know that's what you're doing?" And me being the 22-year-old I was said, no, no, I don't, but I must learn more. And so I went to and toured the High Tech High campuses when they were first up and running, and ended up being a founding staff member at one of their schools. So that's kind of where my PBL roots really come from, is High Tech High. Loved my work there, got to see the school grow so much and really build a PBL culture. I mean, it's an incredible place. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to visit, but so I did that work for a while, was in the classroom for about 10 years. And then I took a position for New Tech Network, where I had the chance to travel the country and support schools in project-based learning implementation. So I've kind of seen it in every model there is, every shape and size. And then went out on my own in 2016. So I've been doing the work of Craft Ed since then, took a little bit of a break thanks to COVID, and also relocating. So I'm now in the Charlotte area, having been born and raised in San Diego, and just looking to continue that work here in my new community.
Yeah, so I would imagine, like with as you said, a parent who's an educator, you kind of get a little bit of someone looking over your shoulder to help and guide you along the way. But did your mom help mentor you through your early years, or did you have, when you got to High Tech High, you found some people that could like really help push and guide you?
I mean, both. My mom, I still look back and I'm like, I can't believe that principal hired a 22-year-old. Like, I took over a classroom of 35 sixth graders and I had no idea what I was doing. And so my mom helped me out a lot those first couple years. And that was in a private school, so a very different setting than going over to High Tech High. I was so lucky at High Tech High to have some incredible, I mean, we're calling them like the Yoda of PBL, that really mentored me through the process. And I just, I'm so blessed, the people that I got to work with, between like Ron Berger to Rick Lear to, I mean, like the godfathers of PBL. So I did have a lot of really wonderful mentors and really wonderful leaders who were able to develop me as a teacher and a leader myself.
So Jenny, when was it that you were, so along this journey, when was it that you were first like really starting to dig into PBL and try it for yourself?
So this is going to sound crazy, but I swear it's just what I always did. I just didn't know that that's what I was doing. Like, in my mind as a 22-year-old, I was like, gosh, I have these sixth graders and I have to teach them about ancient civilization, which I know they don't really care about. How can I make this really exciting for them? And so that was kind of the angle that I took. At the time, I also had to teach religion, same thing. Like, how do I make this relevant to, a 10, 11, 12-year-old? So I just kind of always entered into things of, how do I make this relevant? How do I make this engaging? And so the outcome always ended up being some form of a project, probably more like project oriented versus project-based learning. Nevertheless, I just kind of got on that track right away. And that was just what I always did.
And then you had the book that you made, so Keep It Real with PBL. What is it that, when you say keep it real, what do you mean by keep it real?
Well, it's kind of a play on a few different ideas. So one is, on a personal level, I'm just a really authentic person. So I have a terrible poker face. So whatever you see is what you're going to get. So it's a very raw, honest approach to project-based learning. also really grounded in the real world. So for me, when I'm designing a project, the first thing we ask is what are the standards we need to teach? And then how do we create some real world context that supports those standards? So that to me is always the most important piece. How do we bring in the real world? How do we get students out into the real world? How do we make this relate to the real world? So it's a little bit of play on that. And then of course, just a little bit of play from Jenny from the block.
And like one of the things that, if there's a lot of teachers do projects. So what would you say the difference between like just doing a project versus doing project-based learning would be?
Yeah, then this is something I see a lot in schools is kind of this need for calibration around what project-based learning is. And I think a lot of it is just because it's evolved. Like if you look back, and I'm going to kind of like PBL nerd out here for a second, but like back to like the 80s and 90s, project-oriented learning, as we know it now, was called project-based learning. So if you have a teacher that's been around for a little bit of time, to them, they're like, well, we're speaking the same language. But I think a little bit of our understanding shifted around project-based learning to really include learning, all the learning that needs to happen in the context of the project. So that can't always happen. And most places aren't being asked to do wall-to-wall PBL. So some skills are still happening alongside the project. But I think for me, the big differentiator is students are learning what they need to learn because they need to answer the driving question for the project. So there's no, why are we learning this? Why are we doing this? It is evident, and it's, right out explicitly as a need to know for the project. It's really taking what they would need to learn and just embedding it in the life of the project rather than outside of it.
So is it safe to say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but is it like, I think maybe the reason that projects come about inside of assignments, or you have a lesson plan where the kids are going to give make a poster, or they're going to do a presentation or things like that. Do you think that teachers want to have those things embedded, but maybe there's a lack of planning that PBL provides more of that like planning aspect, or I guess call it intentionality? Whereas if we see like a poster and say a presentation, it's not that the teacher is trying to unintentionally design. They want to include those things, but there's just not as much of a structure for it. Is that correct, or am I off there?
No, you initially said intentionality, and I immediately thought structure, but then you said structure. So yeah, to me, the project-based learning, it forces you to step back, right? And go like really big picture, like why do they need to learn this? Which enduring understanding for backwards design people. And then to build from there. And I feel like when you're not doing project-based learning, you don't have that chance to step back and to look at the why behind why you're teaching, why they're learning X, Y, or Z. And so I think that intentionality is structured into the design. Whereas I think, day in and day out, you're just kind of like reacting to what has to happen that day, or to what students need that moment. Whereas project-based learning really allows you to zoom out and think about the bigger picture and then backwards plan from there.
Yeah, so when designing for PBL with that sort of lens in mind, and from the big picture or the backwards design, that's going to look different, I think, for elementary teachers versus secondary or high school teachers. So, considering those two things, how should PBL look for, say, like primary grade level, and what will it look like for, say, an upper level junior, senior?
Yeah, very different. Even within elementary, there's a pretty big difference between, say, kindergarten to fourth grade. Those two projects and project-based learning are going to look very different. One thing I've noticed, I spend a lot of time working with kindergarten teachers. And I will say it is the most challenging. The younger they are, the more challenging it is to design. And so I always say every high school teacher should have to teach an elementary project, because you really earn your stripes and you really get those systems and structures down. But for the lower elementary, it is really difficult, if not impossible, I would say, to have everything happen in the context of the project. For the younger grades, I always recommend like start smaller. So let's not do something that's going to last a semester. Like, hey, let's just try something for like a week or two, because they're minis and their attention span can't go on for that long, and endure, through a project as long as, say, a middle schooler could for a couple weeks. So we tend to kind of do more of a bite-sized experience, what I call PBL light, in the lower grades, and not every content area is going to fully integrate and be an interdisciplinary project. So because they are on the hook for so many different standards, it's hard to make everything fit and have it be a meaningful fit.
And then what about like a high school student? How could a teacher of high school students kind of implement it at a different level that would meet the rigors of those students? And yet I'm kind of thinking at it through the lens here too. Like David and I were both social studies teachers. How can we make it interdisciplinary? And is it a matter of just finding other teachers to work with you, or can you on your own, if you don't have that, still incorporate things maybe from English language arts or science or math even into, say, a social studies classroom?
Yes. So I feel like you asked me a couple questions. So
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
I think,
So take it any direction you want to.
one I think is, the most important thing for secondary teachers is to find people that will play along with them. So I was really fortunate when I first started designing projects at High Tech High. My class was already embedded history and English. So I taught humanities. So that forced that integration right out the gate. But then I was also paired with a math and science teacher, and we shared students. So there was this integration that was expected. I will point out that the most important thing that allowed that full integration to happen was we had a common planning time every day. But aside from that, I think, the expectation was you're going to collaborate and you're going to design something together and you're going to share students. And so that kind of like expected culture of collaboration, I think, really enabled that to happen. And it was a really easy place to find friends outside of there that wanted to play along too. So, an art teacher would say, hey, I have this really cool idea. Do you want to do this? And we'd say, yeah, let's figure it out. That's not always the case in other settings where I support teachers. Some places the culture just quite isn't, it's not there yet. Sometimes teachers are pretty, in their lane or in their department and just not comfortable branching out. And in those places, I still say, find your friends. So, if there is someone that you cross paths with in the English department that's like, hey, we should do this together, like take it and run, like make that your first connection and your first chance to build something, kind of be that maverick for the staff to show them that it's possible. I feel like I've seen teachers do that in large comprehensive settings, but it kind of has to come from them. So when a principal says, we want everyone to do integrated projects, but there will be no planning time for this and no support. Like it's not really a fair ask, and yet it's asked a lot. So I think in those settings, you just kind of have to find the people that are willing to put in a little bit extra, because it does require extra.
Right. And I think I saw some of that when I was in the classroom. I was teaching a 12th grade political science class, and finding, students would have to investigate civil liberty and tie it to the Bill of Rights and Supreme Court case studies and stuff to kind of tie everything together and show how that liberty had been supported or denied even by the courts. But the teacher who was in a room next to me was an English language arts teacher, had many of the same students through her classes. And she's like, hey, she actually came to me and says, I know you're doing this assignment. I know you're doing this project. Can I use this as an opportunity to show students how to do proper citations? And not even just, creating a works cited bibliography page, but also, inserting quotes and giving credit to the people and the resource that you took it from and the in-text citations that go along with it. And then that's how it started. And then the following year, when we did the same assignment, she's like, hey, can we also work on peer review? And so, all of those students then had to partner up and work on giving peers feedback. Is that kind of like the way that you can approach, or maybe a teacher who feels a little bit siloed, but can find that one other teacher, and then they can build and grow in how they can, implement PBL on a more intentional and structured scale?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking how lucky you were that
Yeah,
somebody came to you. Like that's like a, dream come true for someone like me. Like, yes,
yeah.
of course we can collaborate. But I also was thinking as you were talking about the ways in which they supported your classroom in ELA was that it was creating that why. So students now aren't just learning how to do citations for the sake of learning how to do citations. They're learning how to do citations because the project that you were asking them in social studies required that to be a part of it.
Hmm.
So that's that true interdisciplinary piece why they're having to do the learning, engage in the learning, the process to be able to complete whatever the final product was that you were asking them to do. So I think, I had a gift of being back in the classroom last semester for a little bit. And I honestly just ended up collaborating with other people just through conversation, like hanging out and passing. They'd say like, oh yeah, we're going to do this cookie cutting project in my 3D printing class. And I was like, what? What do you mean? What does that look like? And so then they would, I mean, it's everyone's passion. So everyone's happy to talk about it. And so,
Hmm.
the teacher ended up saying, well, we're going to do this and that. And I thought, I'm teaching entrepreneurship. Like there are $1 billion cookie companies. Like, what if we did something together around entrepreneurship and design and like a business model and the I mean, it turned into like this whole thing. And it was honestly just from like a passing conversation in the hallway.
I'm going to go back here to an earlier thing that you had mentioned too about real world learning, and to me, when I think about that, I think like a student is probably going to look to their local area first, to try to solve problems either in their buildings, in their schools, or in their communities. How important is it to have that kind of local connection when students are and teachers are planning for PBL activities and learning experiences?
It's it's ideal. It's not necessary, but it is ideal. And I will say that I've seen this look a lot of different ways supporting teachers with this in a lot of different settings because it is a heavy lift.
Hmm.
So, I've worked in a school where we had a community connections coordinator that was responsible for managing a database that helped teachers with placing experts, community connections to the project or whatever it was they were working on in their classroom. Um, I know for me, when I went back to the classroom this last semester, I was reminded how much how big of an ask that was for teachers to make those connections. Because when you're working during the school day, you don't have time to make phone calls. You don't have time to get coffee with people to network. I mean, you're lucky if you can run to the restroom and grab a lunch in time, right? So, um, I ended up leaning really heavily on AI to do a lot of the work that I had been project planning so that it freed me up for that time to go start doing the coffee meetings, to going to community events. And that to me was a huge shift in project-based learning because I had better connections with the community. But it was only because I had figured out kind of like this new little niche with AI to help me along. Um, because it's important, but it's just a big ask of teachers to do that.
Yeah, and I think David and I both come from different parts of Minnesota, but we're really surrounded by a lot of rural school districts. Are there any good project-based learning ideas that would work really, really well in smaller rural setting schools?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've seen it done in every setting, and depending on the age, and this isn't always true, but in general, this is true. I encourage teachers. The older they are, the broader you can go. The younger they are, the more narrow you want to
Hmm.
go, just because their kind of proximity of development and understanding is smaller the younger they are. So sometimes that looks like doing something at the classroom level. Sometimes it looks like the grade level, the school level. So that can be in any setting, rural, urban, right? Um, I think extending outside of that to more global issues, I guess, it is manageable in an urban or rural setting. It's just a matter of if students are developmentally kind of ready to take that big jump and talk about transferring contexts, because that's really the difference. Is if we're learning this about social issues in 1920, what does that look like connecting it to today? So it's that kind of transfer that you just are looking for students to be developmentally ready to do that, or to support them with it.
So Jenny, as you look at some of the projects that are done in project-based learning, how do teachers go about assessing something like that?
Assessment is probably one of the most important pieces, and also probably the least enjoyable for teachers, it seems like. So for when I'm supporting schools with project-based learning, because it's backwards design, we always start with what standards and skills you're looking to assess in the final product. And then working back from there, how would you scaffold and explicitly teach that content and those skills? Within that, kind of moving through the cycle of assessment for learning rather than assessment of learning. So asking students to reflect on those skills and content, provide them feedback, and kind of moving through that cycle. So a quick answer to your question would be, I think designing rubrics in terms of being valid tools that can be scaffolded and formatively assessed would probably be my big answer. That's difficult to do for someone who doesn't have a PhD in assessment. And so it takes a lot of time too. And so that's been a big piece also for me with AI, is being able to design rubrics that are a heck of a lot better than I was doing before, and think about using those tools a little bit more often and in more dynamic ways, I think, too, than I had in the past.
Is that the biggest difference? Like, one of the things that I think happens a lot is there's like an expectation for the student to turn in something at the end, right? Like you have an assignment, or even if it is a project that they have to do, they're gonna turn it in, whatever they created at the end, and they're going to get graded on that final product. But is PBL differentiated in the sense that what you mentioned is like, it seems like there's an ongoing assessment that occurs, and you're like you said, you're having the student reflect on things, like thinking about why are we doing this, or maybe why are you including this piece in the project and things like that. Can you speak to that a little bit, like some of the differences that you find in regular ongoing assessment versus like just here's my product at the end?
Yeah, and again, this is up for debate. A lot of people don't always agree with me on this, but there were definitely projects that were very lightly weighted on the final product because they were so heavily weighted on the process to get there. I mean, I had already sat down. I followed more of a workshop model in my classroom, so I had already sat down with every student 10 times, but before they got to their final product, I almost didn't even need to see it. It was like a one eye open. I would look at it. Did they do what we last talked about? Because for me, the heavy lift had already come through the process. So one thing that I found, to kind of answer your question, is, for the standards, it's a little bit easier to give feedback. And there are more valid tools that are often already created for content. It was a little trickier with what we're calling now like the durable skills. So if I wanted to give a student feedback on, say, something like collaboration, that often I would find didn't happen until the end. Well, it's too late for them to adjust their collaboration skills in the context of that project. Like, yes, it's still a teachable moment, and we hope that they think about it and apply it to the next project. But if I want to see some real change, I had to be very explicit about what I mean by collaboration. And then from there, ask them to, yes, reflect about it. But then I have to have the time to give them the feedback on their collaboration and give them the chance to try again. So it's really being intentional about building in time for all of that cycle. And in a perfect world, you go through that cycle 1 to 2 times within the project. So also, depending on how many things you're trying to assess, that can be tricky. So my mantra is always less is more.
Yeah, and so I know, and obviously, like all projects are going to be different in some sense. I mean, you're covering different content, you have different students. There's a lot of different factors that change things. But when you look at like a PBL rubric that gets created, are there common things that show up repeatedly that like when you're designing the project from a PBL lens, you're like, okay, these are things that consistently show up that teachers should be looking for, especially like if they're just getting started in this concept and they really want to do project-based learning. When you design those rubrics, are there consistent things that show up?
In terms of like skills,
Yeah, things you might assess, like things that
yeah,
consistently show up.
collaboration. I'm yet to meet a teacher that's like, I slay collaboration. My kids have got it down. Like every teacher wants to like wring their hair out trying to figure out like, how do I teach them how to work better together? And I think that challenge is probably only getting more complicated the further we go down the line with all the new modern technologies. So collaboration is one I see across the board. Like every teacher will tell you that. Critical thinking, which is kind of generic and can be a lot of other phrases too, but this idea of being able to analyze and make those connections, think deeply, that's probably universal. One that I have seen that has universal interest but not universal implementation would be agency. Every teacher again will tell you, I want my kids to have a growth mindset. I want them to own their learning. I want them to be able to take feedback and apply it and improve their work. That word agency is so loaded. And so again, because we have to be very specific about what it is we're assessing, we really need to narrow in that definition. And I think that kind of disconnect between this big word and the smaller like definitions and how we provide feedback on that is probably what's causing it to be more of a pipe dream of bringing into projects. But that's one that I've seen universally interesting to everybody.
Okay. And then the other piece of this too, we talked a bit about collaboration, and like collaboration is a piece that is difficult. Is there when students are going through the process, so say they're collaborating together, they're working on a project, how do you, inside of PBL project, how do you assess individual learning throughout that as well?
Yeah, and again, this one, not everybody agrees with this. So I don't do group grades personally. And I strongly encourage teachers to not give group grades. I think assessing individually their knowledge and thinking is really important. So that's where the piece of being able to give them feedback on their collaboration is important, because actually assessing a collaboration skill versus collaborative understanding of something, it's much easier to pull out feedback, how to give them feedback on the skill versus how do I know who knows what in that group. So for me, I've never personally done group grades because I want to keep every kiddo on the hook. I want to know what they know. And so yes, they might come together and each of them contributes and brings different ideas and they create some final product together at the end. But I have a very good feeling about what they know and don't know individually before they either enter that group or before it comes time for the final product or exhibition.
So, Jenny, one of the things that you had started to go down the rabbit hole, and I want to now dive a little bit deeper into it, is the use of PBL with AI. And you mentioned it through the process of using it to help you draft a better rubric, to better assess, those skills and the thinking that takes place for each individual student. But how do you feel AI has really changed the conversation around project-based learning?
I don't know that it has yet. So I'm excited to see where this goes. I think it's just starting to surface. I think people have been trying to make sense of AI. And in the past, prior to that, there was making sense of PBL. And I don't know that the two have been bridged quite yet. I think no one's disagreeing that the connection makes sense. It's more of like how we go about doing that moving forward. I haven't personally really dive too much into students using it in project-based learning. My passion has really been how teachers can use it to build projects and all of the tools within a project-based learning kind of unit or year. And so I think there's probably so much more that's going to kind of unfold as students continue to interact with it. But for me right now, in my work, I'm pretty much just focused on how teachers can use it.
Sure, and I'm imagining that a teacher could probably use it to help them with connecting something that they would like to do with their students and making it much more concrete. For example, I mean, like help brainstorm ideas for, maybe, well, actually back up here. Maybe they even start with, hey, I see like this is a problem out there. Maybe it's in the classroom, maybe it's in their community, maybe it's global. And, then, well, start to use maybe a little bit of a design thinking process and maybe brainstorm some of the reasons why it is the way that it is. Look at it through that empathy lens. And then what are some things that we could potentially do to try to help solve that problem or address that problem? And then develop kind of that interdisciplinary unit around it. And I could see AI being that thought partner for the teacher in the process. Is that kind of what you mean, where you're starting to implement it more with teachers and helping them make some more of those connections between the different parts of PBL?
Yeah, as a starting point, yes. I took a great course last summer through IDEO that was called Design Thinking and AI. And
Mhm.
my big takeaway was very much how to use AI as a thought partner to help me brainstorm, like really push my thinking. And so I think, in school settings where teachers can't collaborate very much or they don't come together very often, it can be a really wonderful thought partner for brainstorming, full stop. Like, just even if that was the entry point and the only way a teacher used it, I think they would find a lot of value in coming up with project ideas. Most teachers will tell you that's the hardest place to start is getting
It,
started,
it's
right?
the blank page, right?
It is, yeah. Like, I don't even know what to do. So to your point, you could say I'm a seventh grade teacher. I teach English. I'm looking for a project idea that would cover these standards. You give it the exact standards. Is there something that's happening in the larger community, wherever it might be that you live, and then see what it comes up with.
Mhm.
And who knows what that would look like, but the prompting from there is the most important piece. And so,
Yeah, right. Not a one and done thing, but then
oh,
following up and say, what am I missing here? Like what other questions can the AI ask me that will help pull out more of what my intentions are?
yes, the prompting is single-handedly the most important piece. And also recognizing that it's a process. It's ongoing. It's not one and done. And you get it until you love it. Right. So,
Mhm,
like, you don't have to take it if you don't like it. Like, keep working it, keep refining it to make it work for your students and make it be what you love. And then once you land on that's just your starting point. But your
mhm,
starting point is probably going to be so much more robust and set yourself up for a more meaningful project because you've thought through all those different angles with the help of artificial intelligence rather than just diving into something that might be kind of a dead end. That happens all the time.
mhm.
We can't, prior to this, we didn't have the ability to predict certain things. And so this helps us kind of predict and think ahead to kind of cut off some of those dead end routes.
How important is it for, and I'm setting up an easy question here because I think we all know the answer here, but how important is it for a teacher to have a quality relationship with their students before they start introducing ideas that AI help them create? In other words, is
Yeah.
it important to know your students in order to know with what you and AI worked on together is still going to benefit the humans in the room?
Yes, it is. I mean, that's actually what I wrote my dissertation on is teacher-student relationships and project-based learning. There is nothing more important than that. And that's not unique to PBL, but it's especially
Mhm,
important in PBL. So I think it does take a little bit of time to understand. I know for me, that looked like last year. I'm thinking about I kind of had a bunch of flops in August, September. It took until early October for me to hit my stride and start designing things that worked for my students. And it was a little bit of an ugly, messy process for both myself and my students.
Mhm.
But it just takes getting to know them, getting to figure out their attention span, getting to figure out, anticipate where there's going to be challenges and how to try and stay ahead of those. So it is extremely important. And then for me, using AI really also as a professional mentor or coach. So I would come back to it every day and
Mhm.
say, the lesson that we designed, I tried it and here's where it went wrong. Or my students really struggled with this, which we didn't anticipate. Now what should I do to adjust for my lesson for tomorrow? So again, that iterative, ongoing kind of feedback.
Yeah, and I love the reflective piece you just added into that too, where I think a lot of people don't think, why can't I go to AI to help unload some of my reflective thoughts and get a little bit of feedback on that to help improve? Because nothing works well or perfectly the first time that you try it, right? It's an iterative process, just like the prompting you talked about. Teaching's the same way.
And I think in the past, so being reflective is like one of the most important characteristics of a PBL teacher. I mean, of any teacher, but PBL especially. And so in the past, that would look like, I did everything in Google Docs. And so it would look like me making notes or adjusting whatever it was in the Google Doc so that when I ran it next year, I had
Mhm.
already accounted for it. So I didn't forget. But this is like, you could go real time. And so you don't have to wait to make the change for next year. You could wait, and just make the change the next day, like to the
Mhm.
next day's plans, even not just the plans for next year, but for tomorrow. And so to me, it felt so much more, my teaching felt so much more responsive, I think, because I was able to reflect with AI along the way.
So, in your opinion, does AI make PBL easier to implement, or does it raise the bar for designing better learning?
Oh, that's such a good question. Such a good question. Both. Can I say both?
Absolutely. I could definitely see both.
Yeah, I think, and it's funny, somebody just responded in a comment on my e-course about this, saying that they're hopeful about AI for teachers, but also a little nervous that it's going to raise the level of expectation for what teachers need to do. That it's just
Mhm.
going to become an expected average thing that everyone just does. Um, and I guess I don't really know how to answer either of those questions, but I will just share something I've really been thinking about is I think now more so than ever, we need to be really careful about best practices of project-based learning and teachers having an understanding of those things um, before we can talk about AI supporting them in a project. My big fear is teachers saying, "Oh, I could use AI to make a project and build one, not push back on it or go through that iterative process and then do whatever it spits out." Like that makes me nervous. And so I think while it can raise the bar, we also need to raise the bar of professional development and supporting teachers to know how to be that expert. I mean, I think in all fairness, I use it so much, but I'm also an expert in PBL. Like I wouldn't expect someone who just is brand new to PBL to whip out what I do. So I think there has to be that professional development support for teachers to get to that point where they feel really knowledgeable about PBL so they can guide the AI to support them in designing.
So as we talked a lot about like what the teacher designing PBL, and then if you're thinking about what supports there can be for teachers, how would you say, or what are the best ways for leaders at school districts to provide spaces for their teachers to try these things?
Yeah, good question. So the one thing that's so hard for every school is time, right? Like giving teachers time, but giving them structured support time. So rather than just saying, "Oh, teachers have off from our PD session today to just go work in their classrooms," more focused on being a real organization grounded in collective learning. So as a group, we're all looking at this part of our teaching practice. What are we working on? How can we learn from each other? How are we reflecting and sharing and kind of moving through that process as a staff? Kind of like what we've talked about, the process a teacher would go through in the classroom, that real iterative, reflective kind of circle of learning. So I think time is great, but structured and supported time. Every teacher will tell you in this work that they need more help. So getting them the help that they need. In the schools where I've seen it work best, it's been an ongoing relationship where it hasn't just been come in and do 2 days of PD and then good luck, see ya. It's, hey, let's start the relationship right now, back to school. Let's do a little bit, try it. Let's come together. How did we do? Let's do a little bit more. Same thing. Try it. How did we do? And so it's really more of like this year-long, ongoing with support and project coaching in between. And it's a bummer because schools aren't really set up that way to support that kind of professional development. But I do think that's what teachers really need to do PBL well.
So basically, like if you're looking at sustaining PBL implementation, it is first exposure and then continuous scaffolded training as they go through. Would you say, like, is it, I mean, maybe you can't put a time limit on this, but would it be like after a year of trying something like this, it should start to like just take on a life of its own and people get it? Or is it a longer process than that? Or maybe it depends too. Maybe it's variable.
Yeah. And just kind of like a sweeping statement would be year one, you're trying it. Year two, you're refining it. Year three, you're rolling. Like you are rocking and rolling. You are bringing in best practices of exhibition. You're connecting to the community. You're doing like, what PBL Works would call like gold star PBL. Like that's the ideal. But I am yet to see it happen in less than 3 years, that level of project-based learning. So for the most part, a school leader will say, I just want them to build and try a project this year, just one. And that to me feels manageable. So they can pick wherever in the year they want to do it. They can go through that cycle slowly and have all the support that they need and feel really good about it. That to me is kind of the sweet spot is 1 year. But it just depends on what you want implementation to look like and how deep you want to go. Some school leaders are really ambitious and I want to have a school-wide exhibition. Okay, well, we can't just jump right into that. We need to, you're essentially living project-based learning. We need to, if that's our backwards point, we're going to move back from there. What will it look like for us to scaffold to get teachers ready for that so that they feel good, the students feel good, and the community feels good?
So, yeah. And so as you're looking at like you mentioned the first year, is it, we run into this all the time with PD when you have shifts, right? But like you have a lot of teachers have set lessons and set curriculum, set things that they've been doing for a long time, and that comfort level is there with that. So if they're making a shift to project-based learning and you're looking at that first year, a teacher that's just starting that first year, what type of like benchmarks or things are you looking for them to hit as they design, or I guess redesign their lessons to fit that PBL model?
I always encourage teachers to just start with the easy lift. So, if you love your unit on pumpkins in October and you don't want to let go of pumpkins, then let's talk about a different content that you would rather do the project on. Or if you are a science teacher and for the life of you can't come up with a reason why students need to know about moon cycles, then maybe that's not a good project. So I always say that, hey, like, let's just start with the easy lift. Like there has to be something in your standards that has some real world application that your kids could care about. Like that is my entry point. And so I would say, if that's really where they're entering in at is like, where do I get started? Like, let's just start with designing something that takes what you need to teach already and makes it meaningful for students and a little bit more engaging. Like that to me is like a really good baby step of getting started. And then having success so that you're ready to then ask the next question of like, okay, so then what might a final product look like? Or what might an exhibition look like? Or it takes time and it takes getting comfortable, I think, for teachers to feel open and vulnerable to sharing what their students are doing.
Yeah, that's great. And can you talk a little bit too about Crafted? So your work that you're doing, and if schools were to work with you, can you talk a little bit about how do you help through Crafted help support PBL training and implementation?
Yeah, so it looks different in every school setting. I know that's kind of like a theme here, but in a perfect world, a school has kind of the capacity, so the time, the budget, to allow teachers to be supported over the course of a school year. So I'm getting ready right now to start a new cycle with a school in Fresno. So I'll go into one of their PD days in August and I'll kind of begin with them on, entry point here. Here's PBL, what I would call like 101, entry PBL best practices. Going to integrate a little bit of the AI. Here's how to help use it to make your life a little bit easier in terms of designing projects. And then they are going to run the project. And then I'm going to come back in January and we're going to look at student work and say, how did it go? What do we need to rethink? What do we need to refine? Let's make a note of that to make that better for that project. And how might we use that to inform our next steps in designing another project? So they're in more of a wall-to-wall PBL setting. So they're a little bit more of an aggressive timeline. But the idea there is still it's a year long, and there'll be virtual project coaching in between. So I'll only actually be on site with them the first day. And then it's virtual project coaching. I call it PBL in your PJs because for me, it'll be nighttime. For them, it'll be daytime because I'm East Coast. And then it'll be a virtual workshop in January. So I'll actually only be on site with them that first time.
Great. Sounds like really cool work. I want to do a little segment here. I'm going to call it project or not a project. And so I'm going to give you some classroom scenarios. Then I want you to tell me whether is this just a project, like an isolated standalone thing? Is it project-ish, like adjacent, or is it like true PBL?
Oh my gosh, this is going to be so hard for me because I turn everything into a project. So I'm going to have to like stop before I go down the rabbit hole.
You just got to stop. This is the scenario.
Okay.
And then, I mean, if you want to describe how you could elevate it, you're welcome to do that.
You don't want me to do that.
Yeah, that might be a whole different thing, a whole different episode.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So like, I remember doing, I think out of these 8 of them, at least 6 of them when I was in school at some point.
Is the egg drop in there?
Is what?
Is the egg drop in there?
The egg drop is not in there because I actually didn't do that as a student. I only saw that being done because my best friend was a 5th grade teacher and they did it. But okay. Volcano build, the traditional baking soda vinegar volcano.
It depends. It could very easily be part of a project, but just as a standalone, like they build it at the end of a chapter, not project-based learning.
What about a state research project where the students, they choose one of the 50 states, they do the traditional, here's the population, the geography types, the, makeup of the people in the state bird and flower and everything else. I remember mine was Delaware because I was competitive and Delaware was the first state. So if I thought I chose the first state, then mine would have to be the best because it's first.
My mind goes to the end cap of aisles at Michael's because I'm like it's like Michael's is set up to have all the products for these projects. And it would not be project-based learning. Again, could be a great benchmark that maybe is formatively assessed within a project, but in and of itself, standalone, not what I would call project-based learning.
What about the creating of a school garden where, the students, they're studying plants, they learn to calculate the costs of, purchasing seeds and, the water that needs to be added, to getting, the light sources that they need, testing soils, deciding what to plant, and then designing and maintaining that garden through the spring.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen that one done quite a few times. And I've seen it really elevated to include, like markers that have QR codes where you can learn more about the different things in the gardens. And I think that one is so evident that it's project-based learning because of all the different content you just listed out. I mean, you rambled off like 5 different, content areas that would be fully interdisciplinary in that project that students would have to know in order to have this final product of developing the garden. So that to me is for sure project-based learning.
What about like a student uses AI to generate a slideshow about a renewable energy source, and they look through it, they've prompted it, and it seems really good, and they just take it and they present it to the class?
So without AI, I will say I already kind of have beef with the PowerPoint being a final product for a project. So that's a dead giveaway of where I'm headed with this one. But I would say, yeah, I have this really great hierarchy that kind of uses blooms and shows what traditional products are versus project-based learning products. And the PowerPoint and the poster, those are all on like very low level of blooms. So for me, that one, even without AI, would definitely fall to a lower level.
What about student reads a novel? They've got the option to make the shoebox diorama of a setting from within that novel.
I mean, probably not. If it's just regurgitating a setting from a novel. If it's like, we'll see again, then I could just go down the rabbit trail of what you could do to make it a project. But just as it is, as you described, no, not project-based learning.
But they're
Project.
using all the materials from Michael's in order to craft it and put it together.
You mean that their mother probably put together?
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
This one I've actually seen, but it was done at an outdoor learning center where students went and they spent a week out in the northern part of Minnesota here, and they did a really great unit as part of that hands-on curriculum of a lunch waste challenge, where over the course of the week they were measuring the food thrown away, analyzing patterns, researching different solutions, and then trying to create some sort of a campaign that they can take with them when they left that outdoor research center and they go back to their schools.
Yeah. And again, my mind immediately goes to, as you're listing off all the different things they did, why they were doing it. They were doing it in service of being able to take it back to their community, being able to actually apply it in some way. And that is the big differentiator between a project and project-based learning.
What about an end of the unit choice board, where they've got 9 different options that they can show how they've demonstrated their learning? It could be any of those different things that we've talked about here.
So here's what's tricky with that one is obviously depends on what's on the choice board, but from a PBL perspective and an assessment perspective, everything on that choice board would need to assess the same content and skills. And that would be hard for me to come up with more than maybe like 3 to 4 ideas. Maybe with AI now I could, I don't know. But I think for the most part, that's what's tricky about choice boards or giving students unlimited choice in any project is, hey, we're still on the hook for these standards and these skills. So let's be sure that we're not allowing students to do a piece of art that includes paint being thrown on a canvas and calling it art versus an entire documentary. Like those are 2 very different content and skills that we're going to see in each of those. So that's a little bit of a long-winded answer of it depends on what's on the choice board.
Mm-hmm. And one more, what about like playground design? Students learn some of the physics of the different, the swings or a slide, and maybe they start to apply some simple machines like in a seesaw type of a thing, where they're also learning about making different items of the playground accessible to students of various abilities. And then they present their ideas that they have to maybe a PTA group or a school board or to the principals.
Yeah, I love that. And I've seen that done a few times. I've seen it done particularly well using design thinking as the framework.
Okay. So Jenny, we're going to get into the lightning round here. So these you can give 1-word answers if you want to, or you can expand on them as much as you would like. Jeremy and I will kind of go back and forth, and we'll wrap it up too with a this or that. So what is the first or a good first step for a teacher who wants to try PBL next semester?
I would say I'd recommend more of my PBL light approach that I've kind of referenced, where it's just kind of dipping a toe in and taking the standards and making them connect to the real world and think about what it might look like to shift into more of like a final product rather than a summative assessment in traditional terms.
So David and I just got back from ISTE, which was in Orlando this year. So it got me to thinking about people that go to theme parks. You're bringing the family to a theme park like a Disney park or any other one. Do you map out a plan to maximize efficient use of your park time, or do you just go with the flow?
Oh, I'm a planner in all things. I plan my life like PBL. I plan it so much like PBL. I have trained my family to think about it the same way. So they'll be out and about and they'll be like, Mom, there's this really cool thing happening. You should do a project on it. Like they now know the way my brain thinks. It's awesome. I can't stand not planning. It gives me anxiety just thinking about it.
What should a principal do this month if they want to incorporate more authentic learning in their school at the start of next year?
For teachers or for students?
Well, can we do both? Or
Yeah, this is a time of year where instructional leaders are thinking about their PD plans for the entire year. And so one of my favorite things to do is to do field work. So taking the teachers out, even if it looks like taking them out and doing a walk out in the community, getting them out to think about how they might bring the outside in is one of my favorite things to do for back to school PD. And then for students, I would say, I guess it ties into teachers too, but kind of making that bridge a little easier for teachers. So maybe the instructional leader shares, here are 5 different community resources that are looking to collaborate in projects this year. And then maybe they become the bridge between the organization and the teachers to help them figure out when it makes sense to come into the classroom or learn more about the organization. So just kind of narrowing it down a little bit for them and then supporting them with that.
What's a book or show that isn't education or PBL related that you're into right now?
Anything by Kristen Hanna. I cannot stop reading that woman. She's the most incredible author. I'm reading 4 Winds right now. My family knows once I start one, you're not going to be talking to me for another couple weeks because I can't put her. I just love her writing. I love it. It takes me to another place, and she's just amazing. So I'm really into her right now. I'm going to run
note to one of your kids, if you want to get time away from mom for 2 weeks, buy her one of those books.
Okay. Totally.
All right. So our last one for this is you're gonna do a conference for Jeremy and I. We're gonna have you as our keynote speaker, and you have to choose your walk-up song for what you're gonna have playing as you go up. And just so you know, we now have a playlist on Spotify with all of our guest songs that have answered this question. So this will go on the Spotify playlist, just as an FYI.
Oh, my Lanta. Oh, it has to be Jenny from the Block. It has to be.
Okay.
But that was not my first thought. My first thought was terribly inappropriate, so I didn't say it. That was my second thought.
So Jenny from the Block, obviously, that's J-Lo, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. It will be added, and I will send you the playlist.
Yes, my jam.
And I love that the name tie-in just makes it so perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
I even channeled Jenny from the Block with my hoop earrings today.
Nice.
And if you're watching on YouTube, then you'll definitely get to see that. If not, just manage, I wouldn't say they're overly excessively sized, but
subtle.
medium.
It's a subtle,
Yeah.
Subtle Jenny from the Block.
And then just a few rapid fire this or that questions. And, you have to pick one or the other here. All right. Would you rather use notebook and paper or a notes app?
Notebook and paper.
Would you prefer podcasts or music while traveling?
Music.
Would you rather go to the mountains or the beach?
No. Beach.
Would you rather get a text or a call?
Text.
When at a social event, are you the first to leave the party or the last one to go at the end of the night?
I'm the first, and it's nothing personal. I go to bed early.
And if you're with that group, do you prefer a big group hangout or one-on-one time?
One-on-one.
That
was the easiest part of this whole interview.
Was it? Okay.
Except for the beach or the mountain. That one was hard for me.
Yeah. It's usually Jeremy and I really can't. It's hard for us to guess what people will say anymore. We had a long streak of mountains there for a while. So
I feel we've had a beach comeback though.
yeah,
It's
it's evening
interesting.
out.
So I'm from Southern California, so I had both, and I didn't realize
Mm.
how fortunate I was until I moved to Charlotte, where I don't have either.
Cool. Well, Jenny, thanks for joining us and talking about all your work and things you have going on with PBL. Do you want to just take a moment and tell listeners like any upcoming event things that you have that you want to plug, where people can get a hold of you, socials, all that type of stuff, and we'll make sure to include that in the show notes too. But if you want to shout out some of those things.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I actually just launched last week my new PBL plus AI certification. So using AI to support teachers in project design. I'm really excited about that. I've had some really good feedback already from a few people. And then yesterday, I just launched the version for instructional leaders. So just so that they are familiar with the terminology that teachers are going to be using, but then also kind of thinking bigger picture around how do I structure PD agendas, a year at a glance of really supporting teachers through PBL implementation, AI implementation. So I just launched both of those right before the back to school season. So I'm excited to see what comes of those. And then on my website, I've also just launched a series of new resources, and I can share the link with you for AI support, in particular, a PBL planning form that actually has the prompts for that teachers can use and say put into like Gemini to help them build their project, kind of what we did, and walks them through that process without me.
Awesome. Well, thanks again.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.